Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Carvin. I'm an associate professor at the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. And I really want to thank everyone for joining us today to discuss an extremely timely topic. Our timing is actually incredible. The Indo-Pacific and Japan-Canada cooperation under Trump 2.0 with our very distinguished guest, Dr. Akio Takahara, who is an emeritus professor at the University of Tokyo and the distinguished visiting professor at the Tokyo Women's Christian University. This wonderful event brings together people from across continents and across Canada, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. And I also want to acknowledge that, of course, that I'm speaking from Ottawa on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Nation, especially at a time when we're having renewed conversations about our partnerships in this country and, of course, with our great friends and allies. I would like to really thank the Embassy of Japan in Canada, whose idea it was to host this event, as well as the Asia Pacific Foundation, who has just worked miracles in bringing this technical and otherwise for bringing this event together. Now, I've been asked to read the house rules for everyone who's coming into the seminar today. Please kindly note this is a Zoom webinar. We cannot hear or see you at any time. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on the website shortly thereafter. We do encourage your questions and comments. So there is a Q&A box at the bottom. You'll see with a little question mark in it. Please use that to submit your question. And as well, given the subject and the large audience we are expecting today, we apologize in advance if we can't take every question that we do receive. Also, if you do have any questions, please reach out to events@asiapacific.ca if you have any questions. And we have Mandy, who is standing by. And with that, I would like to introduce the Deputy Head of Mission of Japan to Canada, Minister Ishii, to provide some opening comments.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from today. On behalf of the Embassy of Japan in Canada, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this crucially important and timely webinar. And my sincere gratitude goes to our co-organizers, without whom this event wouldn't be possible, the Asia Pacific Foundation Canada and Carleton University. I also wish to thank Takahara Sensei for his participation in today's webinar. Is obviously a top scholar on China in Japan, and I have personally looked forward to this webinar since it was announced a while ago. Well, as far as I'm concerned, only 3 months have passed since I arrived in Ottawa in early September, but I would like to share my humble observations just in an attempt to inform today's discussions. Firstly, Canada's engagement in the eyes of Japanese diplomats, Canada's engagement in the Indo-Pacific is really long-term and comprehensive, as it should be. Even after the announcement of 3 years had passed since the announcement of Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy in November 2022, we see continued engagement from Canada. And secondly, Canada has not just the will, but also capabilities to contribute to peace and prosperity of the region. Particularly Canada's ambition to be an energy superpower is not just a political rhetoric, but it has real substance. And I think we believe Canada really has the potential of providing energy security, not just to Japan, but also the region with its massive natural resource reserves. And thirdly, both Canada and Japan are struggling to maintain the rules-based order in the region. We always take into account evolving power balances and geopolitical landscapes. And fourth, in seeking a new equilibrium or a free and open Indo-Pacific, in other words, there's a lot of room for our bilateral ties to expand further. We have upgraded our security partnership, including through the signing of the Security of Information Agreement, as well as the soon-to-be signed Equipment and Technology Transfer Agreement. Also, just the fact that today we have the delegation of Keidanren in Ottawa, and it's really the first time in 9 years. This simple fact speaks volume about the growing economic partnership between the two countries. I believe that today's webinar is really a great opportunity for all of us to really think through how Japan and Canada can work together to shape the region that is so fundamental to our strategic interests. And I very much look forward to an insightful and engaging discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Ishii. Hello, everyone. My name is Vina Nadjibulla. I'm the Vice President of Research and Strategy here at the Asia-Pacific Foundation of Canada. And it's a pleasure for us to be partnering with Carleton and with the Embassy of Japan to Canada on this timely event. In terms of what we are hoping for this really short hour that we have together is to hear from Professor Takahara, not just on the Canada Japan relations, which are really critical, and Minister Ishii just gave us a really good scene setter for how important that strategic partnership is and where it might be going, especially in the current global environment, but also to get a sense from the professor on the Japan-China relations. Of course, all of our participants would be aware of the most recent diplomatic spat that began on November 7th and is continuing. So to get a perspective, certainly from Tokyo, on what precipitated the crisis, how it's been received and understood in Japan, also perspective, obviously, from China, what are China's objectives with respect to this crisis, and then also, of course, to situate the Japan U.S. relationship and the alliance in the current context, both on the economic relations, which a lot of us are following closely, but also from a security perspective. And then, of course, the final element, just giving us some prognosis for the security dynamics in the Indo-Pacific in 2026 and where Canada would be fitting into that, as the Canadian government under Prime Minister Carney is currently reviewing its Indo-Pacific strategy that was launched 3 years ago and its positioning in the region. So Prime Minister Carney was, of course, in South Korea for the APAC meetings. We're hoping that he'll soon have a chance to visit also Japan and other parts of the region in 2026. So I think, again, this webinar is extremely timely, both in helping us understand the current headline news that are happening in Asia, but also to give us a sense of where the dynamics in the region will be going in 2026 and how should Canada position itself to best advance its own interests, but also to be a good partner to countries like Japan, Korea, and others. So that's our hope. And we'll begin with a presentation from Professor Takahara. Then I'll ask him a few questions that'll give our participants and audience a chance to put all of their questions in the chat box. And then we'll ask the professor as many of those questions as possible before we wrap up. So our guest's bio is available online. I won't go through very lengthy and substantial achievements that he's accumulated over multiple decades in his career. But I'll just note that in addition to the 2 designations that Stephanie mentioned, he's also an honorary senior fellow on Chinese politics at the Asia Society Policy Institute Center for China Analysis. He has also served at the Consulate General of Japan in Hong Kong, at the Japan Embassy in Beijing, Harvard University, Peking University, the Mercado Institute for China Studies, MERICS, and the Australian National University. You're picking up from that, of course, that he is a scholar of China-Japan relations, as well as China's political economy. So, and he's written a number of publications, including in English, The Politics of Wage Policy in Post-Revolutionary China, China-Japan Relations in Modern Era, as well as a publication entitled, How Do Smaller Countries in the Indo-Pacific Region Proactively Interact with China? And then finally, a publication on the Xi Jinping administration's faces various dilemmas and the end of strategic patience. So all of those are really interesting topics and very much things that we hope to hear more about. So without further ado, let me turn to Professor Takahara for his presentation. Professor, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Vina, for your very kind introduction. Thank you to the foundation. Thank you to the embassy. I'm so happy to be given this opportunity to exchange views with you on the Japan-Canada cooperation. The first point is, of course, Trump 2.0. and how the Trump tariffs are giving us big problems. And it seems that Mr. Trump doesn't think much of his allies, and rather he seems to be rather kind to countries like Russia and China. So we find that very strange. But anyhow, what makes us worried is not only the economic woes, economic issues that we have because of this, but also what's going to happen on the security front. You know, what kind of security policies is he going to take in Asia is not clear at all. And his Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War, whichever way you want to call that, Mr. Hegseth has been very clear about American commitments in the Indo-Pacific, including Taiwan, and that was reassuring. But at the end of the day, it is becoming very clear that everything is up to Mr. Trump. And Mr. Trump hasn't said anything very clear about security questions. And, you know, most recently, as it was introduced, Japan and China have been having this row over Taiwan and over security concerns over Taiwan. But Mr. Trump, after receiving a phone call from Mr. Xi Jinping, the president of China, he calls Takaichi, our new prime minister, and apparently told her that she should not provoke China on these questions. So we cannot but start to be worried about his vision about the region. You know, he has openly said he will visit China next April, and what kind of a deal he has in mind is not clear. So we are wondering whether that's going to include any security questions, like the future of Taiwan. That is the focal point of our attention at the moment. Okay, then what did Takaichi say at the parliament that China is reacting so sharply against? Now, many international reportings are not correct, because I have seen reportings in qualified international newspapers saying that Takaichi said at the parliament that Japan is to defend Taiwan when a contingency happens. But actually, that's not what she said. It was actually a very lengthy conversation, Q&A, that she had with this opposition member of parliament. And this questioner was asking, when would you acknowledge that the situation is a survival threatening situation when things happen around Taiwan? Now, you may not be familiar with this concept, survival threatening situation. It is a situation in which Japan legally is allowed to use military force, but towards the very end of her answers, she did say, at the very last sentence, the light blue part, it could become a survival threatening situation if China uses military force to put Taiwan under control. And if you just cut out that part of her remarks, then, you know, we can understand that the Chinese side, if they only looked at this sentence, they will be very surprised. But I would say that it was just the off-the-cuff remarks at the end of a very long conversation. And if you read her remarks through, it becomes very clear that she was not intending to provoke China, that she was not intending anything different from you know, what the Japanese said they would do, or what the Japanese hadn't said and they would do. So it's rather what's the word? Surprising that China has been reacting in a very sharp way. Okay, is it moving now? Yes, and responding to that, China has launched a barrage of measures. Maybe you know about these things. The government of China discouraged their citizens from visiting China as tourists or students. And they quote that, there is an increase in attacks against the Chinese in Japan, so beware. But of course, these things are not happening. And second, they said they'll suspend the import of aquatic products again meaning, after the release of treated water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, where there was an accident in 2011. The Chinese stopped importing aquatic products without any scientific reason. But recently, because of the thaw in the relations, they will start importing again. But now they said they are going back to the banning of the imports again. And they have cancelled many music concerts. One singer had to stop in the middle of her song because of the authorities moving in. A lot of cultural events, academic exchanges, student exchanges, they've been cancelled, all of them. We are very disappointed because we thought we had learned lessons from our experiences, many years ago when we had clashes over the Senkaku Islands, the Diaoyu Islands, that we should never stop these exchanges, even if things happened politically between us. But the Chinese have resorted to these measures again. And apparently they've embarked on a world campaign to disgrace Japan. And they had one result. We saw the Myanmar junta coming out and criticizing Japan, using exactly the same words that the Chinese government is using. They've crossed the red line. The Japanese have seriously provoked us. We cannot tolerate. And Myanmar is saying that Japan should never have done those things, etc. So that's the situation now. And a very threatening kind of language is used against the Japanese. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the typical one came from the very famous wolf warrior diplomat, the consul general in Osaka, responding to Takaishi's remarks, saying that if you poke your head into our internal affairs, the filthy poking head must be chopped off without hesitation. It was really shocking language. And that should not be tolerated. It was quite incredible that those words were uttered by a diplomat, and the PLA daily says this, etc. So that's the situation in which we are in, and I think many countries, including Canada, have experienced that kind of a situation with China. Okay, so. Okay, then why are the Chinese doing these things? What are their aims? I think they're trying to exert pressure on Takaichi. They've been worried about her for some time, and they've seized this opportunity to send a very powerful message that she should be careful in her remarks and behavior, especially around Taiwan and history issues. They want to divide Japanese public opinion, weaken Takaichi's new government, and perhaps they also want to divert their own people's attention from the domestic woes. The economic downturn is causing serious concerns, and the level of disappointment or dissatisfaction amongst the Chinese people is increasing. They want to divert that to an external enemy. I think that's part of the reason. Now, what are China's external policies then? How should we understand these Japan policies of theirs in the overall context of China's external policy? I would say they have one central strategy and four major tactics. One central strategy is to win the competition with the United States. They're obsessed with this central strategy now, strategic goal. Xi Jinping has said internally, this internal speech has been excavated by one Japanese academic called Takashi Suzuki, and I think it's quite significant. He said to a group of naval officers, high-ranking ones, already over 8 years ago, that history indicates that a true world power is one that is both a sea power and a land power. It is our important strategic decision to proceed from only a land power to a nation that is both a sea power and a land power. So he wants to be a true world power. He wants to be a sea power too. So he wants to go out into the ocean. And of course, the United States is going to stand against that. So this strategic conflict between the United States and China is to continue for some time to come, that's for sure. And the four major the tactics, paradoxically, in the short run, they want to stabilize relations with the US because they understand the gap in the overall comprehensive national power is still there. So to develop, they need to gain secure time and space for development. And for that, they need truce with Trump 2.0, and that's what they achieved. They need to support Russia. They understand there are contradictions with them, but they understand that both sides need each other. So they're supporting Russia in the war against Ukraine. Yeah, and the third one is approach Canada, Europe, Japan are okay, Australia, these countries, if possible, drive a wedge. And this attempt has been helped very much by Trump 2.0, their own goals that the Americans are scoring. And fourthly, this is an old tactic, but they are trying to win over the global south. We can easily see that there are a number of dilemmas in China's external policies. If they want to compete strategically with the United States that has an alliance with Japan, so they're exerting pressure on Japan now, but they also understand that in the long run, they have to mend relations with Japan. While they are supporting Russia, how can they make friends with the Europeans? So there are many contradictions that exist in this set of external policies of China's. Okay. The other question is the domestic situation in China and how that is reflected in their external policies. Yes. And when we look into the stability of China, especially Chinese politics, I find it's important to look into two axes of Chinese politics. One is the horizontal axis, as it were, elite politics, power struggle. That's one level. And the other dimension is the vertical dimension, meaning the relationship between the Chinese Communist Party and the masses, or between Xi Jinping and the ordinary people. So we need to check the stability of this because China, at the end of the day, is the elephant in the room when we discuss about the stability of the Indo-Pacific, when we discuss the need for cooperation between Japan and Canada. Please move. Okay. And in terms of domestic politics, there are lots of rumors about faction building amongst the elite in China. I'm not going to go into the details. If you have questions, I can answer. And whether these rumors of faction building and infighting is true or not, but what's true is that there are rumors. And that means that people in China have started to look at elite politics with an image of the late Mao period. So post Xi Jinping is in their minds when they look at Chinese politics today. And it could lead, faction building could lead to a power struggle once the process of power transition is going to begin. And in this context, of course, what's important is how healthy or unhealthy Xi Jinping is. So we can discuss that if you like, but I'm not going to take too much time on this because there's the other very important axis, that is the vertical axis. Please move, please move. Okay, the vertical axis here, the axis is shaken very much. And Xi Jinping is very worried about that. Or the CCP leadership is very worried about that, because they understand they don't have the legitimacy to rule because they are not elected by the people. So they have to keep on proving that, they are the party that's worth leading the country. But Xi Jinping is always worried about a possible color revolution happening. So now that people's confidence in the system is shaken, especially since the failure of the zero COVID policy in late 22, early 2023. And the economy, as you all know, hasn't picked up since then. And the problem is becoming aggravated because of the demographic issues. So they are in trouble. There's no doubt about that. So the picture is very patchy. Some parts of the Chinese economy, society are very bright. They're succeeding in a lot of important technological developmental areas, but at the same time, the shadow part of the Chinese economy and society is very, very dark. With low consumption, declining investment, etc. Local government debt is very serious. People's salaries are coming down, not only the public servants, but also in the private sector. And youth unemployment is one of the biggest issues that they're facing at the moment. So some Chinese are rather bullish about the future of their country, especially when they look at the United States. They feel confident that China is doing well. Many even liberal intellectuals felt very proud when they saw the fantastic military parade, or however you want to describe it. Maybe I shouldn't use the word fantastic, but in the minds of many Chinese people, it looked that way. But others are rather pessimistic about their economy, not only their economy, but they understand that this regime is not going to last forever. Okay, and then there's a concern about diversionary diplomacy, yes? Xi Jinping has been emphasizing the question of national security. Now they have revised the anti-espionage law, or we remember the two Michael story, but now they're detaining and arresting Japanese citizens also without very clear reasons, and excessive contents of patriotic education. Patriotic education in China is conducted not only in classrooms, but also they use movies, films, TV programs, and including allowing some extreme SNS clips going viral. For example, criticizing or pointing fingers at Japanese schools in China, saying they're schools to breed some espionage guys, some spies, which is really completely outrageous. But the CCP does not control these, and some Chinese have this idea that really Japan, with this evil mind, is trying to invade China again, or has some wild ambitions about Taiwan, etc. And this propaganda about the danger in Japan, that is, that the Chinese people here in Japan are facing big risk. It's all false, but they're not controlling that kind of flow of information. So we wonder if the CCP needs Japan as a lightning rod forever, or not only Japan, but will xenophobia develop, and can a Boxer rebellion recur in China? That's a concern that we share, I think. So finally, what should Canada and Japan do in this kind of a situation? I think, there are many agreements between the two governments, but I would like to emphasize 2 points. One is to promote the rule of law and the principal multilateral order in the Indo-Pacific. We have to find many concrete ways to do this together, because the Chinese propaganda machinery can be very powerful and influential, and we should warn the global South. What the Chinese promote. In their language, they say they promote an equal and orderly multipolar world. It sounds very nice, but in fact, when we look at what China's been doing, the equality that they talk about is only the equality between the poles. The multipolar is multipolar, but between China, United States, perhaps Russia, there is equality. but each one will have a sphere of its own influence, and there is no equality there. That's the kind of the image of the future. And we have to judge China by their deeds and not by their words. All right. So that's point number one. And point number two is promote free trade. We have to promote free trade. This is one important lesson that we learned from the two horrendous world wars in the previous century. One is, of course, we have to solve international disputes through peaceful means. But the second one, the economic lesson that we learned, was that we should never form economic blocs, because economic blocs will lead to wars, and therefore we need to promote free trade. So I think we should try and increase the members of CPTPP. If the WTO is not functioning well, we have hopes on the good functioning of CPTPP. So here is a very important area in which Japan and China, and Canada and Japan should cooperate. Well, thank you very much, and I apologize for any trouble that we had earlier, but that's my talk. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor Takahara. I think notwithstanding the technical glitches, it was a really engaging and substantive presentation, and you've covered so many different dimensions. So let me begin by a few questions, and then, as I've mentioned before, audience members are encouraged to put in their questions in the Q&A box, and I will get to as many of those as possible. So to start with where you began, with the current diplomatic crisis between Japan and China, I wanted to draw you out a little bit on what do you think are the reasons behind China's furious response, because so much of this is obviously manufactured and done very deliberately. Is it connected to sort of where US-China relations are, sort of coming on the heels of a summit, which many interpreted as really positioning China as a peer country? Many felt that from that summit, it was really Xi Jinping that came out as the bigger winner. It also obviously comes at a time when China is trying to stabilize relations with the US. So speaking of the diversionary diplomacy and needing to have an external enemy, does Japan now serve as the enemy number one, kind of almost replacing the US, which is entering more of a stable relations going on? Or to what extent it's also connected to the fact that PM Takaichi is herself new and China is kind of trying to really maybe level set that relationship and sort of deliver key messages to her as early as possible. So what do you think accounts for the level of reaction from China?
Yes, thank you, Vina-san, for your good questions. I think all of them apply. All of the factors that you mentioned are in the response that's coming from China. And the basic point is, of course, for the CCP, unification with Taiwan has long been a nationalistic target. So historically, it's been like that. But now especially, I think Xi Jinping has this ambition to unify with Taiwan during his term. So he wants any external possible interventions out of his way. And that's the one basic reason, I think. And secondly, externally, yes, especially this timing when China-US relations are good. I think they find that as an opportunity to exert pressure on neighboring nations, especially Japan. And they have always been extra worried about Japan's intervention in Taiwan for reasons, I would say, even for reasons that we Japanese don't understand quite well. Especially, I don't quite understand. One example is when the former Prime Minister Zhou Enlai, Zhou Enlai was the Prime Minister during Mao Zedong's days. He had this lengthy conversation with Henry Kissinger before their relations were normalized. But Zhou Enlai repeats their worries about Japan intervening in Taiwan affairs. Japan may send their military again and occupy Taiwan, which is quite outrageous from our point of view. Why would they think in this way? But they have this trauma, apparently. And that's a very basic point. But there are many situational factors, as you mentioned, the emergence of Takaichi, the state of China-US relations, and so on, and Xi Jinping's ambition. So what you mentioned, I think, all applies to the current situation.
And in terms of where this will go, do you foresee further economic coercion or escalation on the part of PRC, or are we kind of seeing that this might be the end of the escalation? Where do you feel the dispute will be going, given that PM Takaichi is not retracting her words? She seems to have the backing of public opinion in Japan, and I want you actually to speak a little bit to that, what has been reaction, but also where is this going?
As of today, my hunch is their measures are not going to be any harsher than they are today. Why? They have already cancelled, according to them, the Chinese side, they have cancelled hundreds of flights to Japan. Okay, then which are the airlines that had to cancel these flights? It's all, of course, Chinese airlines. The Japanese airlines are flying as usual, which means that the Chinese airlines are losing a lot of money out of this. And many Chinese tourists coming to Japan, if there's a decrease, the group tours are halted at the moment. But the individual tourists are still coming in a big way. And we were suffering from over-tourism in cities like Kyoto, Hiroshima, and so on. So yes, there will be some damage inflicted on Japanese tourism industries, but not very much from our point of view. But I think the Chinese side would suffer from these measures that they're taking economically. And as we discussed, the economic situation in China, in the eyes of many people, are very bleak. So I don't think they will do anything, further that would damage their economy even more. That's the hunch that I have at the moment.
And in terms of the impact on domestic politics, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about sort of what has been the response and what's happening with PM Takaichi's domestic positioning and potential elections in January. So there's a lot of speculation around that.
You know well about Japanese politics. Yes, Takaichi's supporting rate is still very high, or has gone even higher because of this row with China. I think we can observe that 75% of the people support Takaichi, according to one poll that's been done, and that's quite extraordinary, I would say. But there is a bit of risk that I sense there, because I'm not sure if the Japanese people very clearly understand the security environment surrounding us. And it could be this rather emotional mood that is supporting Takaichi at the moment. But we have to be very clear-headed about the real situation. Otherwise, we could make mistakes. So I'm a bit worried about that.
Well, maybe then if I could ask you to expand a little bit on this point that you're making. It's obvious that there is a rallying around the flag, which happens when there is a external coercion. But when you say there has to be a better appreciation of the real security situation facing Japan, so maybe if you could elaborate a little bit on that, and of course bring in the U.S. and the stability of the U.S. alliance into this, which I'm assuming you're alluding to, in addition to PLA's strength and capacity right now.
Yes, so as you know, Japan has been a pacifist nation for 80 years, and that's our identity now. So anything related to military affairs is being avoided or has been avoided in the Japanese society for such a long time. So we really are not well versed in military affairs, very unlike the Chinese. The Chinese love military affairs. They love power. But that's completely a different situation in Japan. But the reality is different, right? The reality is now becoming very serious around Japan. So we have to correctly understand the military situation, what the Chinese have been doing, and what they can do, or what capacities that they have, and what is our capacity on our side. And on the basis of such very cool-headed, objective consideration of the objective situation, only then we can make correct decisions. And I don't think the public understands quite well, or even I don't fully understand what the real security situation is around us. The Chinese people know very well about the weaponry systems of China's, of Japan's, and etc. But the knowledge level is very different. And I'm not sure if they have the correct understanding or not, but they have a certain image. And there's a big gap between our perception of the relationship, their perception of the relationship. So this is very dangerous. We have to narrow the gap, the perception gap, which is based on information gap. There are a lot of misunderstandings on their side about the Takaichi remarks too. So we need good communication, which is difficult through mass media. But so we have to find a lot of channels to directly meet with each other and convey what we know as facts on our side, and narrow this information gap and perception gap. Otherwise, things could develop in a very dangerous way.
Absolutely. No, that's a really good point. And sort of speaking about the importance of narratives and explaining positions, there's a good question that came in, and I want to weave this in because I think it fits nicely. The question is about the impact of this dispute on how other democracies, notably Canada, what lessons they might be drawing in terms of how this all has unfolded and their positioning vis-a-vis Taiwan or Taiwan contingencies. Like, what is your sense sitting in Japan of what's the larger narrative or lessons that others might be drawing for it, including Canada?
Yes, I think many peoples and many countries are watching very carefully how Japan will handle this situation now. Japan is dubbed as an advanced country in meeting new challenges, and the rise of China is one of them. So we have already some experience, the 2010 trawler collision incident, 2012 big clash over the Senkakus, and I think we have relatively more experience. And from our experience, I think one important point is we should not panic. We should not rush, and we should be careful about the division in our own societies. How we should communicate well first between us, share a common understanding of the situation, and try not to be manipulated through information that comes in from outside. So that kind of an internal coordination, I think, is extremely important. So be united. You can have different views, but at least share the facts. And that's, I think, is one basic point. And of course, from ordinary times, we have to try and diversify our economic partners. We should not rely too much on one country, we shouldn't put all our eggs in one basket, as you would say in English. So that kind of an effort from ordinary times is very necessary. And when one country falls into a problem like Japan is falling in now, there has to be a good network of help and assistance from like-minded countries. That's also very important, I think.
Absolutely. No, I think that's really critical, this idea of democratic solidarity and making sure that we are standing with each other when one country is facing difficulty or coercion. There's another question that I think is relevant, which is why do you feel like so far we haven't seen actual public protests in China in the way that we saw over the Senkaku Island disputes, and when and how does CCP sort of mobilize that tool or allow for that to happen, kind of at the level of boycotts of products and shutting down restaurants and obviously also protests?
Yes, that's a very good question because there are two things compared to 2010, 2012 that the CCP has not done yet. And those are the two things, the boycotting of Japanese products and anti-Japanese demonstrations, which they did in 2012, for example. And I think it's because first, there have been some writings in the internet, the Chinese writings saying that we are not doing boycotting this time because we understand that if we boycott Japanese products, in fact, many Chinese will suffer because there are so many Chinese working in Japanese factories or Japanese department stores and so on. So we should not do that. And I think the CCP is worried about demonstrations because they could easily be turned against themselves. In 2012, there was one incident in which in Shenzhen, north of Hong Kong, in the town of Shenzhen, the demonstrations, which were supposed to be anti-Japanese, but the demonstrations actually went to the party committee of Shenzhen. They don't want to repeat that. And especially they understand that many people are not happy with the current economic and social situation. So I think they're extremely worried that if they allow demonstrations to happen, they will come to the party and the government.
Right. So that's connected to your point around the vertical axis and the horizontal axis of stability, political stability in China. So now that you've spoken about the vertical axis, let me come to the horizontal axis that you sort of teased that's in your presentation, noting that there's beginning of conversations about a post-Xi era and the way that we had the post-Mao era conversations. So maybe if you could elaborate on that point a little bit, sort of what's the timeline on that, or what's the nature of those discussions that you can ascertain, at least from where you sit?
Yes, famously, Deng Xiaoping, the former the leader of China, said that a paternalistic system can lead to factions. Meaning, he was thinking about the late Mao days when everybody started thinking about what will happen to me when this guy goes off the stage. And I think that kind of a situation has started to emerge in China. But it all depends on Xi Jinping's health, because if he's healthy, people are sure that he will continue to
And
be
do you
there.
think he's healthy? So maybe let me just ask directly, what's your sense of his health?
I can only guess, but he is not very healthy, but he is not very unhealthy.
I see.
Yeah, I think that's the situation of his health. And the two pictures that I showed you when I was talking about the health of Xi Jinping's, Xi Jinping's at times disappear from the scene for weeks. And on the 4th of June this year, he suddenly emerged after an absence of 2 weeks. And the way he reappeared was a bit strange because he met Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, in a very weird way. And he met Belarus's president Lukashenko at his home, apparently. Why at his home? And why did he call his wife and daughter to join the dinner? Many new developments there. And all these things make people wonder, about his health, about his idea of succession, and so on. And so he did go to Tibet. That was the other picture, but only for 24 hours. And he was the only one that wore an overcoat. There are many, many signs indicating that he's not in the pink of his health. So he doesn't travel far. Only to close.
It's interesting when we have to analyze the dress of the leader to try to get a sense of their health, but it's certainly I mean such as the moment that we're doing that with the President Putin as well, incidentally, and of course the two of them, that hot mic moment when the two of them were discussing longevity has gone viral, I think, for that reason. I know we're getting close towards the end, and I have a couple more questions from our audience, which I do want to ask you about.
Sure.
One has to do with this issue, and I wanted to address that as well, of economic security. And you mentioned diversification, the need to for Japan, for Canada, for others to be obviously engaging with China economically because of their size. We have no choice but to be prioritizing economic security. The question from our audience member is specifically around research collaborations, but I think it applies to broader sort of how do we engage with China while sort of recognizing all the national security and economic security concerns. So what are some maybe lessons like at the high level that you can share from Japan's engagement with China and how to protect sensitive technologies, research areas around AI, quantum, which Canada obviously has centers of excellence on, and which I know China wants to engage with us on?
Well, in terms of protecting our technology, I don't think anybody has a very clear answer. For example, what do we do with the students that come to our graduate schools in natural science? Yeah, we should be careful about protecting our secret technologies or whatever. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we should ban all these students from coming. No, I think we should have more students. But then how can we control the situation? No one has a very clear answer, and I think we are exploring. But at least we should, enhance our consciousness about the question, because I think a lot of the natural science professors are still not fully aware of the risks involved in taking these students. So we should enhance our general consciousness about economic security, technology security, and so on. I think that's one answer. But we are, still exploring, and we can share our experiences. I think that's important to share our notes, as it were. And I'm not sure if enough is being done on that front.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's one of those things that we have to constantly retool because things change. And of course, now we're in a very different moment with China than we were even a year ago because of what the US is also doing on the economic front. In your presentation, Professor, you mentioned sort of what Canada and Japan can be doing together. And this ties nicely to another question that has come in about what has been sort of how Japan is evaluating or how Japan is looking at the responses so far from democracies to this crisis. I mean, we know that China tried to get France on the eve of the visit of President Macron to China to side with its interpretation. And you mentioned that only Myanmar has bought into the narrative. But what about the others? I mean, they are not buying into the China narrative, but are they being supportive enough of Japan? Or is Japan getting the kind of support that you would like to get from fellow democratic countries?
In fact, I am not fully aware of what kind of conversations are being made between diplomats, for example. So I can't say for sure, but certainly if we could get more visible support that ordinary Japanese can see, that would be even better. And of course, the Trump-Takaichi conversation, for example, didn't bode very well for the Japanese, Open support is also much appreciated, especially from important people in other countries, friendly countries. But not enough has come to, assure the Japanese that these countries are behind us.
And is that impacting public opinion? I know you mentioned that Prime Minister Takaichi's numbers have gone up, but do you sense what's the kind of the general mood in Japan? Is it nervous? Is it calm? Sort of how would you describe the situation in the country right now?
I think it's very calm. So, we welcome Chinese tourists, for example. Maybe we should be more aware of the risks, as I mentioned, than the general public is feeling now. But generally speaking, the society is very stable, very calm, and I think the Chinese who actually visit Japan will be very surprised by this because the propaganda they're hearing is that the Japanese are fuming, they're becoming very violent against the Chinese, but nothing of that sort is happening. and Takaichi's support rate is very high. But when it comes to China, some people can get very emotional. That's the kind of a situation.
Absolutely. No, it's very helpful. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us, for sharing your insights with us. We will, with your permission, make the PowerPoint available to those who signed up for the webinar, just because I think there's a lot of richness in there, particularly on sort of what are China's objectives, strategic objectives on its foreign policy, as well as tactics that they use. I think that's something that certainly would be of interest to the audience, and something that they can find out more in your publications, of course, but it's good to have the PowerPoint. So I won't try to summarize the discussion. We're sort of at the end of our hour, but I wanted to thank you for joining us, and also a huge thank you to Stephanie at Carleton and to Minister Ishii. Of course, if Minister Ishii or Stephanie, if you want to say a word before we close, No,
well, I just what I wanted to say is that very much enjoyed Takahara Sensei's remarks and learned a lot. We'll think through how we might navigate this difficult terrain for now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And we will have the recording of this also available on Asia Pacific Foundation's website. So again, a huge thank you to Professor Takahara and to everybody who's joined us. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.